Final Fantasy VII, a game originally made in 1997, remade 23 years later in 2020 for a more modern audience. Is this classic something that should have been touched, or would have it been better to have been left alone? That's what we're going to find out today on this review of the Final Fantasy VII Remake from my personal perspective, somebody who isn't really into JRPGs, whose main exposure to them is honestly the Pokemon series. So it'll be a pretty unique perspective, I feel like, compared to some other reviews on YouTube. And yeah, so before we hop into it though, do me a favor, slap that like button, hit subscribe, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when my videos come out. And now, let's go ahead and hop into it. Let's start with the pros. Right off the bat, starting with the pros, we're going to kick it off with the music. The music in this game is incredible. It's really atmospheric, really just goes into the game world and really expands the world of Final Fantasy, and it's definitely a high point for me. I had heard from other reviews about how the music was incredible and how a lot of people that was what they were looking forward to in the remake, was honestly just hearing that music again. And I see why. I see why some people find the music in this game to be some of the best in gaming, period. It really is incredible, even if you don't play the game. And if you like video game music, or if you think you might like video game music, give it a shot. You know, go on YouTube, look up the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack, and just kind of listen to it in the background. I don't think there's any singing in any of the soundtrack songs, so it would be good to just listen to while you're doing homework or doing a hobby. Check it out, definitely worth a try. The next thing is the cutscenes. The cutscenes are, oh my god, gorgeous. They are incredible. These are probably some of the best cutscenes I think I've ever seen in a video game. Some of the best cutscenes I've ever seen in animation, period, honestly. Like, you could make a movie, a high quality movie, out of these cutscenes. They're gorgeous. The lighting, the character models, the weather effects, every single aspect of the cutscenes is gorgeous. The attention to detail is impeccable here. No corners were cut in the cutscenes, and it's for the best. Next pro is going to be the story of Final Fantasy. Now, this story is really good. It follows you, Cloud, a mercenary who at first is helping out this avalanche group, this eco-terrorist group, just for the money. You know, you're a mercenary, you're just doing it for the money. And along the way, though, you know, things are gray, and you end up helping this group because a childhood friend of yours is a part of it. And it's definitely interesting how they treat the story, because, as I've mentioned before, Avalanche is an eco-terrorist group, so their actions have consequences. They're not just the good guys, the classic good guys that you see in most games, but they're also not bad guys either. You know, from their perspective, they're freedom fighters. From, you know, the perspective of Shinra, the major corporation in the game, and some of the people that work for Shinra, some of the everyday citizens that aren't doing anything wrong, they see Avalanche as a terrorist group. And so it's really an interesting perspective, and it's really cool to play from that perspective. Hey guys, I want to go ahead and expand on what I was saying about the story being a pro for me. I felt like I didn't do it justice just by saying that it's really good, impactful, emotional. I also want to mention that it is, as far as I'm aware, being new to Final Fantasy VII, this one does stay pretty true overall to the original version, and So that's great for newcomers like myself, as well as for people who have a lot of nostalgia for this game. And also, it's it's not connected to the other Final Fantasies, I don't think anyways. Or if it is, it might just be like some references or maybe a few characters. I think the story is pretty self-contained because I did look that up before getting this game. I mean, nobody wants to jump into the seventh game in a series that is all connected. And I was able to jump into this no problem, keep up with the story, and it all made sense. I didn't feel like I was missing anything or missing any major plot points. Then also, the ending of the game has is pretty crazy. It's a pretty crazy twist, and that's a twist that the original didn't do, I heard. And I looked up a little bit of a character that you see at the end of the game, and it does seem like they're going a different direction than the original. And the way they did it, though, it opens it up to be able to go pretty much anywhere they want it to, and it gives them a lot of creative freedom, and it's really exciting to just think about all the possibilities they could do with this game now and where they could take this series. So I think whether you're a newcomer to Final Fantasy, whether you've played Final Fantasy before, I think this story is gonna interest you, because for new players, you can get into it, you're not gonna be lost, and it's a really good story. For old players who have nostalgia for it, it's gonna be nostalgic this one, but then going forward, it's probably gonna have some major differences. And yeah, I mean, the story's really interesting. It's really intriguing. It's all about like fate and destiny, or at least that's the undertones of it. So it's a really good story. Definitely a very high up there on my pro list. So I just wanted to fit that in and cut in this little piece of audio to expand on that. But I'll get back to the normal audio that I recorded earlier. So hope you enjoy the rest of my pros cons list. Also, the characters. The characters in this game are all really great. There's some definitely better than others. I think Cloud was great. I think Tifa was great. I think Aerith might have been one of my favorites, if not my favorite. And there's other great ones along the way too, but those are probably some of my tops. The gameplay is also really cool. They do something interesting here with the gameplay where, and I never played the original, you know, as I said in the beginning of this video, my main exposure to JRPGs has pretty much been Pokemon and maybe the Dragon Quest 9 or 11, you know, Switch demo. That's pretty much it. But here, I was expecting turn-based combat, to be honest, and they blend it with action. They have an action-based combat system where you're doing the basic attacks, you know, you're blocking, you're parrying, you're doing light attacks, heavy attacks, and the real turn-based part of that comes from your ATB meter and your magic. And the magic is, you know, it's a certain pool. Like for mine, when I noticed it, it was mainly around like the 30s and the 40s. Eventually, I think it got up to the 70s. But you know, you have different tiers of magic for how upgraded your mana shards are, or I'm actually forgetting what they're called, but basically they're mana crystals, and you put them in your weapons and in your armor, and the more you use them, the more they level up, and they have different tiers. So you might start off with fire, and it's a basic flame attack, and then all of a sudden you get an intermediate level, and then a higher level that all subsequently cost more mana, but all do more damage, and some have blast radius effects, so you can take out multiple enemies. I experienced that with the fire quite a lot against, you know, regular human enemies. And then the ATB meter is these special, really heavy-hitting attacks, and also some healing abilities as well, depending on what shards you have in your weapons and armor. your abilities range. Some of them cost 1 ATB, other ones cost 2. It's really an interesting dynamic because you're constantly having to go back and forth between fighting real time and then going through the menu slow motion and deciding, okay, which ability am I going to use, which spell am I going to use, and spells I find are very important, and also the abilities are also important, and there's summons as well. The summons are really cool. Infrit was my favorite, I think is his name. He's this giant flame guy. He looks like from Japanese culture. He is just awesome. I mean, I didn't use the summons all that much, but he was really cool every time he entered the battlefield, and I had a lot of fun with him. With all those good pros, there are some cons to go with it, and some of these are from just the fact that I'm not a big JRPG guy. I'm also not used to JRPGs. I don't have much of a history with them, so you may disagree with some of these, but right off the bat, I'm going to say a few of the characters I found to be really over the top, sometimes to the point where they weren't really enjoyable to watch in the cutscenes. Wedge was a big one for me. Also, Barrett at times I found to be a little over the top and kind of annoying and frustrating when it seemed like he would be very close to screwing up your plans and just causing all this attention to be drawn on you because he's so short-tempered. But most of the characters are good, and even Barrett had his moments. He grew on me for sure at the beginning though, and then throughout there were a few parts where I was like kind of over it, but he did grow on me. Now, the next thing is the gameplay, the negative part of the gameplay. The enemies they're pretty spongy, honestly, I found, and I played on normal difficulty. I ended up going back and forth between normal and easy just because the enemies were spongy. They weren't necessarily hard in the sense of like difficulty, like actual, like they had all these different moves and stuff. Some definitely were. The VR missions were definitely hard for sure, but other ones, it just felt like they took so long to whittle away their health little by little that it just became really frustrating, and I just wanted to get over with it. I wanted to progress in the story, and yeah, I did not dig how spongy some of the enemies are. And it ranges too, because some of the enemies, it only takes a few hits, and then other ones take forever. I did find, though, that's why this con isn't as big of an issue for me as it was early on in the game, is that later in the game, probably like the last fourth of the game, to be honest, is when I remembered, oh wait, there's upgrades and materia. That's what the magic's called. I had it written down here. Upgrades for your weapons and materia for, slotting in your weapons to just give you different abilities, different powers, and those helped so much. For the longest time, I didn't understand why, the game went from, in the first third, was incredibly easy to the point where that's why I forgot the upgrades and materia slotting was even a thing, really. And then later on, the difficulty just ramped up just randomly, it seemed like, from super easy to all of a sudden I was dying all the time. And then I remembered the upgrades, and once I upgraded my weapons, once I reslotted some materia so that my companions, I did the materia for Cloud as the main character, but I'd never done the materia or changing the weapons or upgrading for the companions, and I never even did the upgrading for Cloud until the last fourth of the game, and that did make it significantly better, although there were still a few enemies I found annoyingly spongy. For the most part, that did fix it, to be honest, and it ended up not being a big deal. I think if you remember, the upgrades and materia are there, and you should be using them, and you should be reslotting the materia. and you should be, taking care of your companions and reslotting their weapons as well as the main character Cloud's, then I think you'll have a lot better time with the combat than I did for part of the game. Most of the game I had a good time, and then once I figured out the upgrade system, I had a good time again. It was just kind of a bit of time in the middle there where I don't know what happened. I forgot that whole system existed, and it was a mess. Now, the next thing is textures. As much as I doted on the cutscenes being freaking amazing, I mean, the best cutscenes I've ever seen in a video game, good enough to be in a movie, the textures in the game in general vary heavily. The cutscenes, I mean, I just made some notes here. The cutscenes feel like PlayStation 5 to me, truly next-gen cutscenes. The character models feel like PS4, the main character models, that is. So they do look good. They still look very good. They're just not cutscene level. And then the NPCs come along. Just the regular NPCs that you get side missions from and you see around the semi-open world. They're like PS3 era. They're noticeably different. They're noticeably worse than the main characters, and they look kind of awkward when standing next to the main characters. But then you get to the city textures, just the world textures all around. Look, PS2 at best, early PS3 for some of them, but some of them load in and go from PS2 to early PS3. And then you have some missions where you're high up, you're in like the rafters of this place. Like there's one where you're having to turn off the sun lamps to power up a door to go through, and you see the city below you, and it looks terrible. That looks PlayStation 1. I'm not gonna even excuse that. That looks straight up PlayStation 1. Like all their budget went into the cutscenes and the main characters, and then they said, oh shit, we still have a world to put textures on, especially in these parts where you're supposed to be able to see like from way up above. And I get if it doesn't look as good as when you're up close, but it looks ungodly. Like it looks horrible to the point where it looks like just a stagnant backdrop that's made of freaking cardboard. It's terrible. It's really unpleasant, honestly, and it actually drew me out of the experience, and I hated every mission where I had to be really high in elevation because of being able to look down and see those crappy textures. Those were by far my least favorite missions, just because it was such a variation that it really took an experience that, because of the cutscenes and the story, really draws you in and really, it's really emotional. It draws you in. It makes you want to continue playing and find out what's happening next. That texture work is just so piss poor that I wanted to get through those levels as quickly as possible. Really bad. I don't know what happened there. When they make the next part, because this remake is only like the first 7 hours or something, expanded into 45. When they make the next part, go ahead, upgrade those textures, please, 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 even if you just make them PS3 level. PlayStation 1 level is unacceptable. PlayStation 2 is pretty unacceptable too, but when you see the PlayStation 1 textures, and I'll try to see if I have a clip to show you guys, it's really unacceptable on the PS4. Now, the next thing is side missions. I'm going to go with the side missions. They're tedious, man. They are tedious. They're not very fun. They're repetitive. They're uninspired. They're just not very good. They're like, find the kids and take them back to school. Find the chocobos, which are basically they're these like giant chickens, but like they're used as kind of horses in this world, to draw carriages around places to and from different sectors. And you're just supposed to find these things and then find Shinra crates and battle some some ghosts, battle some monsters. It just really uninspired stuff you would expect out of an MMO in my opinion. Really not fun. I did it for the experience and for the rewards, but um, there's some I didn't do, to be honest, or there's one in particular I didn't do. I struggled so hard during this squat side mission where you as Cloud are basically doing a squat off with the head of this gym. It's a really silly side mission, and it is kind of funny at first until you play it. And then when you play it, you're like, this sucks. Because it gives you these button prompts and it goes around in this, pattern. But then as you go, your character gets faster, so you have to press them faster. But the button prompt goes away, it kind of fades off, and you don't have the prompt anymore. And if you press it too late, you're going to mess up. And if you press it too soon, you're going to mess up really bad and you're going to have to start all over. And it's fine for the first couple, but then you get to the hardest guy that you need to beat to get the trophy for it, the PlayStation trophy for it. And that is horrible. You can only mess up like one time. And it is so frustrating. I definitely rage quit a couple times at that one. I hated that level, or not that level, that side mission. And then there's another one as you're playing as Tifa for pull-ups. I didn't even bother. I thought about it because I was like, I like achievements. I like trophies. I'm not some platinum trophy hunter where I try to complete all a game's trophies. But if I know a trophy's available or it feels like there is, I'll usually go after it. I knew there was a trophy for this, and I just said it's not worth it. I just want to continue with the story that I enjoy and skip this crap. And it's just it's not a good side mission. It's really it is inspired, that one. Like, it's really unique that you have a squat off and a pull up off, and it is a unique side mission, but it's not fun. I would rather do the tedious side missions, honestly. And then the last thing is there is some serious fluff and drawing out of certain chapters where, you clearly see where you're supposed to go, and then Tifa Barrett will be like, well, that bridge is out, so now we have to go through this sector and then that sector, and then we have to cross that bridge and then wrap around, and then we have to go through this other, underground place, and then we'll finally get there that if that bridge hadn't been out, I could just walk straight to. I hated stuff like that because it really broke up the flow of the story. I am somebody that is a big believer in quality over quantity, and I feel like those missions were quantity over quality, and I did not enjoy it. I really enjoyed the story. They had a great story there, and I'm like, okay, I know you were trying to hit this mark of like 35, 40 hours. I would have been much happier personally if you would have stopped at like 25 or even 20 hours and just cut the fluff out, cut the crap, and leave us with the good stuff. That would have been a much more satisfying experience instead of something that drew me out of it to a point where I stopped playing for a while because I was just so sick of it, because it's all kind of, the drawn out chapters are all kind of clumped together in like the middle of the story, sort of. So it's like this whole part that's just really painful to get through, and you don't want to do it. You want to finish the game, but you don't want to go through all that busy work, all that fluff that doesn't really matter to the story. So that's definitely, I think, the biggest con for me. I think the fluff and the textures are the biggest cons, but so it sounds like there's a lot of cons, but I'm being nitpicky, and I'm purposefully being nitpicky because this game is overall so damn good, and that's reflected in my score of this game. Even as a JRPG noob who isn't a big fan of JRPGs, that is, and who's never played a Final Fantasy before, and who generally doesn't like this type of game that has this type of combat system, I'm actually giving this game a 9 out of 10, a Zeppelin. I'm giving this game a Zeppelin because it's that damn good, and I realize that for me, it's probably an 8 out of 10, but for a lot of people, it's going to be a 9. And if you're a JRPG fan, or if you're a Final Fantasy fan, you might be giving this a 10 out of 10. This might be a perfect game for you. But just for me, I saw a few issues that, if I see anything that they can improve on going forward, that right there eliminates it from being a 10 out of 10 for me. But I also know that I'm in a different category than a lot of people, and so I felt like an 8 out of 10 was a little bit unfair, because I feel like most people who watch this video who are interested in getting this game are going to either be into JRPGs, be into Final Fantasy, or they're just gonna enjoy it a little bit more than me, because they're not gonna be as nitpicky. They may not care about the textures, because I come from PC gaming. I played PS2, then PS3, then 360, and Wii. Then I went straight into PC gaming. Got a Switch and a PS4 during like the last year and a half of the PS4's life cycle, kind of catch up on some of those amazing exclusives. So stuff like textures really sticks out to me a lot more than they will for most people. Anyways, that is it. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. That's my final score, a Zeppelin. And if you enjoyed this review, please do slap that like button, hit subscribe, and ding that notification bell. Make sure you're notified when these videos are put out. And definitely leave your comments down below on what you thought of this game. Also, if you're a Final Fantasy fan, let me know which other Final Fantasy games I should try out, because I did like the story of this game a lot, and I did like the combat a lot, generally speaking, but the story especially, and I would definitely be interested in playing some of the, quote-unquote better Final Fantasy games. Also, if you're a JRPG fan, let me know what other really good JRPGs there are besides Pokemon, because, I'm already on top of that one. Anyways, without further ado, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.
Oh, would you look at that? It's the end of the ride.